Hey everyone, Anarch here, and this is another episode of Anarch Abridged. If you're not familiar, this is a video series where I just sit down and I talk to the camera for like 20 to 30 minutes on some topic that's on my mind. And the topic that's on my mind today is the difference between moving fast and moving slow. Now, obviously, I don't really mean like moving your body fast and slow. I'm talking about making decisions fast and slow. I'm talking about thinking fast and slow. I'm talking about, organizing fast and slow. I've noticed that this topic is one that kind of comes up a lot, even though it may not seem like it. It kind of underlies a lot of broader discussions that we end up having when we are discussing about how to move forward. And that's going to be the topic of the video today. So if that interests you, you should stick around. Also, if you've been here like numerous times, if this is like, the fourth or the fifth or sixth time that you've been served up one of my videos, you should go like comment below. You should subscribe to the channel, leave a like. All that stuff is super helpful. And also, because I know that it like matters in the metrics, I should also mention, go become a patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/anarch, ANARK. And that's it for the spiel. I won't bore you any longer with that. So moving on to the topic of the video. One thing I've noticed is this topic of moving fast and slow, like thinking fast and slow, making decisions fast and slow, it really does come up pretty often in discussions about anarchism, or really any form of horizontal decision making. There's this conception that to say it plainly, making decisions fast is good. Now, I think there's a sort of underlying false assumption here, which is that making the decision fast is a sort of uncomplicated good. But what I would like to emphasize off the bat, and this is something we're going to return to here in this discussion, is that it's not good to make decisions fast if they're bad decisions. So, let me kind of lay out the premise early on here. In a general sense, fast decisions are going to be decisions kind of based from knee-jerk. They're going to be decisions that are based on our sort of emotional biases. They're going to be based on stereotypic conceptions. They're going to be based on previous heuristics that we have developed, which are shorthands, which allow us to think and act quickly. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad in and of itself. Sometimes all you really need is that gut response to make a good decision. Okay, and we'll get around to that. We'll discuss that here in a minute. But thinking slow allows one to think methodically. Okay, when things move slow, it allows you to come back and revise previous conceptions. It allows you to ruminate on the concepts at hand. And also, might I add, I think most importantly, it allows many people to become part of the process of making a decision. If you try to decide things too fast, what you're going to find is that whether it is a formal or an informal process, you're going to steamroll people, right? Like, you can imagine, for example, you and your friends are together. You're trying to make a decision about what to eat, for example, right? And, you bring it up, like, what does everybody want to eat? And the first person says, I don't know, Burger King. And you go, Burger King, that's it. Boom, we're going to Burger King. And you just start driving to Burger King. You didn't really give anybody time to talk about it, right? You also kind of took the first suggestion. You moved really fast. You probably moved too fast. The other people in the car didn't get any feedback on the decision. And we might imagine that as we are allowed to discuss longer and longer, we're probably going to come to a decision that helps the most people, that allows the most people in the car to give us feedback about where they actually want to eat, right? And, we wait a little longer. We can imagine, if we have 10 or 15 minutes, we utilize 10 or 15 minutes. Everybody kind of discusses and thinks, and eventually everybody gives a bunch of ideas, and they say where they would like to go. I would like to note that That waiting period was important, right? The faster you made the decision, the more of a gut instinct reaction it was, the more knee-jerky it was. And it's possible, I should say, that even after a long discussion, everybody else is like, actually, yeah, Burger King does sound good. And, you spend 5 minutes on a decision that could have taken 5 seconds. And I agree, that time that was inefficient in a sense, okay? But I want to say that it's not just strictly inefficient to spend time on these discussions, because perhaps everybody does not come to the decision that we're going to go to Burger King. Maybe there's like 2 or 3 options on the table. And then after those 2 or 3 options are on the table, we discuss our way through them. We're going to go get Thai food, or we're going to go get something else, right? We discuss our way through them. And maybe the person who originally suggested Burger King says, actually, no, that does sound better. When given time, it allows people to discuss possibilities. It allows us to amend those possibilities. And it's even possible that the people that answered from the gut really fast were not fully informed when they made that decision, that it actually was better for us to take the time to arrive upon consensus. So I give that weird example because that's a very common criticism that is made of horizontal power structures. The idea is that hierarchical power structures, they act fast. Okay? They make decisions fast. And that's because in the conception of a hierarchical power structure, you have the higher up you go, the more centralized it is, right? At the top, we got the tippy top, and they make decisions. Those decisions, they get carried all the way down. And so the decisions made there at the top, those are fast decisions. Okay, and the idea is that we make quick, responsive decisions at the central point, and that central point sort of radiates outwards, and everybody follows the decision that is made. Whereas horizontal systems, it's conceived that every decision must be made through a long process of getting the consensus of everybody that is involved, and that's slow. I want to say a few things up front because we're going to continue to kind of parse this out, as you know, if you've ever heard me ramble about anything. I just want to say that it's not necessarily the case that hierarchical power structures make decisions more quickly, and it's also not necessarily the case that those decisions are implemented more quickly. In fact, hierarchical power structures, since they are based on these sort of like degrees of separation from the ground, what that means is that when a decision is made up at this central point, made up at the top, it has to filter down. It has to filter and filter and filter, and it goes through degrees of telephone as well. Okay? And then if anything goes wrong, it has to telephone back up to the top. Okay? It has to, go to the middle management, and then it has to go to upper middle management, and it has to go to upper management. Eventually it gets handed back to the top, or I think you get the idea that I'm describing here. And it's been noted by many theorists that this is actually a pretty slow process. So it's not just as simple as saying that a hierarchical power structure is fast. I think it's more appropriate to say that a hierarchical power structure will more generally make a decision fast, but that implementation is not necessarily fast. By contrast, horizontal power structures often take quite a bit longer to make decisions, but implementation can be really, really quick so long as those people that made those decisions actually really agree with the idea and they carry forward on it quickly, right? Because think about it. If we have some kind of horizontal consensus process, we have everybody involved in the deliberation. So there's not going to need to be a process where we re-communicate all of these facts to them. They were involved in making the decision to begin with. And therefore, they already know everything we discussed. They know all the details, and they know why we're implementing it, and they know how to implement it because we discussed it. And then they can go right to work implementing it. There doesn't need to be all these levels of telephone down the scale and then back up the scale and then down the scale again. We just skip all of that in horizontal processes. So what that means is I actually concede to some degree that I think that horizontal decision making is slower, but that horizontal implementation is arguably faster if you've got everybody on board and willing to act upon the decisions that are being made. So that's one thing. I just want to kind of put that up front. But I also want to mention that making decisions slower and implementing slower is not necessarily a bad thing. Oh, sorry, I need to mute my phone, apparently. It's not necessarily inherently bad that we make decisions slowly. So one thing I want to mention, I realize that not everybody who watches my channel is familiar with this, but if you've ever heard of what are the Zapatistas in Mexico, the Zapatistas in Mexico are an insurgent libertarian socialist movement. They are a horizontal power structure. They have these municipal councils that lie at the level of community, and these municipal councils carry their decisions through layers of federation, which is essentially what anarchists have always proposed, but they are not explicitly anarchist. Nonetheless, it is a horizontal power structure. And it seems notable to me that they use the symbol of a snail. In fact, they name all of these municipal councils after the snail. Their municipal council structures, these areas, these regions these local regions, they're called caracoles, which is the word for snail, as I understand it. I'm not a Spanish speaker, so forgive me if my pronunciation is awful as well. But that's the idea, okay? They're called snails because moving slow isn't bad. We are making a new world as we act. It's not like we should be trying to move more quickly than is necessary. That's one thing I want to mention, is that what we've seen is that when you are allowed time to make decisions, you should probably take the opportunity for that, to make that decision in a longer period of time. Because generally, decisions that are made with the, long time scales, those are decisions that are better informed, that take all of the details into account. It's sort of pertinent that there was a book, actually, and that's kind of what the title of this video is tongue-in-cheek responding to, Thinking Fast and Slow, written by a guy named Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman won like a Nobel Prize for this book. And, some of the studies that he cites haven't really held up over time, but in a general sense, what he says is accurate. And that is that decisions that take a long time, where we are allowed to meditate on those ideas, those are generally very detailed, logical, analytic results. Those we have to think slow to think very analytically. Okay, in order to deal with a variety of details, with things that are complex, we have to think slow. Fast decisions are bad when it comes to complex subjects. In general, making fast decisions is good when something is simple, when it relies upon a simple metric. If, for example, all we're supposed to do is judge an appearance, we can make that decision pretty quick. Right? If it relies upon an emotional or a gut reflex, then making decisions fast, it might interest you to know, actually tends to be better. If something is simple, the longer we think on it, we can tend to complicate it. But in a general sense, when we're talking about like horizontal organizational structures, we're really not talking about those sort of like skin deep gut decisions very often. Those usually take place down on the level of individuals or, communities that don't even need to come together to make those decisions in some kind of council structure. If we come together in a council structure, if we come together in these like federations of councils, as we're imagining in anarchism, we're generally going to be dealing with things that actually do need more deliberation. We do need more time to deal with them. And this is actually to our benefit, in a sense. Moving slow on complex issues is actually just good. So I know when I say all of this, okay, I'm extremely aware of the fact that we live in a culture where everything moves fast, where the expectations, decisions will be made fast. Content will be delivered to me fast. If I need something, I can get it fast. And this is partially because, we live in a society where everything is sort of like exponentially increasing. Everything's going faster and faster and faster. But I would argue that that's not necessarily just like a good in and of itself. In fact, I would argue that this tendency that we are developing to expect everything fast is leading to us not being able to think complexly about issues, that is leading to us not being able to consider these wide ideological frameworks, these frameworks that actually determine how the world works. And that's because we are expecting things fast. We're expecting things to be, on hand right off the bat. And I don't think that's necessarily good. In fact, as we discussed, it's bad if you are supposed to make decisions about complex subjects. So this can be seen in a wider dialogue about the subject, right? The criticism of horizontal structures is that they make decisions too slow. What I like to point out is that that's not necessarily bad. That in fact, we should think slow about complex things. And often what people think when they think of things moving fast is they are thinking of how it affects them fast. As soon as they've heard the announcement that that the decision has been made, the law is implemented and they must immediately follow it. But, kind of going back to one of the things I first mentioned, Congress, for example, is not making decisions fast. They're not. They're not making decisions fast. They're making decisions kind of excruciatingly slow. If you knew when the bills that were proposed that were eventually passed and turned into laws, if you knew when those originally proposed, you probably would not think Congress was acting quickly. Even though it's a hierarchical power structure, our society is hierarchical. Yet, our conception is that they're making decisions fast, but Congress isn't making decisions fast. They're going through long periods of deliberation. They have all kinds of complex rules and jargon and positions that are necessary in order to get anything passed. It's a hierarchical power structure, yet it's still very burdensome. It's still very slow. And so it's still not really making decisions very fast. Or, for example, we have lots of examples in the military. The military is considered like the example par excellence of hierarchy making fast decisions. But like grunts can tell you, that's really not necessarily true. Decisions are often very slow. We have lots of story of people being down on the ground and delivering information to their superiors, and that information has to get passed up many rungs before a decision gets made. That's not always the case. I understand well enough to recognize that sometimes decision only needs to go up to the person just above you, and sometimes it has to go up 3 ranks, and so on and so on. But in a general sense, these decisions are not being made ultra fast. And that's because the separation of those layers actually is what slows down the decision-making process. So what you've done is you've got hierarchy and you didn't even get quickness out of it. And as I've said, that's not necessarily off the bat a bad thing, but it means that the hierarchical structure that people are claiming is going to deliver quickness of decision-making still isn't really delivering quickness of decision-making. And that seems really notable because that is one of the big arguments that people who argue for hierarchical structures have on hand. I would like to suggest that it's just not necessarily a bad thing to take a long time to make a decision. It's not a bad thing to take a long time to implement. It's only bad insofar as you need it to be fast, okay? If you want things to be complexly considered and implemented, and the things you're dealing with have many details, and there are many people involved, it's actually good to make decisions slow. It's actually good to implement things slowly. This is why, once again, the Zapatistas use the symbol of a snail. They don't use the symbol of a roadrunner or something like that. It's actually a benefit to be able to make decisions slowly. As we close, I'd like to bring up another detail. And that is, when I was studying for part 2 of A Modern Anarchism, I was learning a lot about complex systems analysis. I was learning a lot about how complex systems function, okay? And when I say complex systems, I want you to understand that I mean complex systems, like pretty well what you probably assume I mean by complex systems. You know, things with lots of moving parts, and they're all conferencing with one another, and there are many lines moving between each of the nodes. And one of the things they noted was that systems that led to emergence, which is to say systems that acted as more than the sum of their parts, those were systems that went through what they called gradual self-adjustment. Gradual self-adjustment, okay? Generally, when really fast things happen in an ecology or any sort of complex system, that's bad. That's bad. That means the system is generally going to break apart. I mean, think about it, you know. Something happens really fast. Imagine an impulse being delivered to an object. It might break the object, right? It might break the object. It might shatter it. It might bend it. It might damage it, okay? And the same thing is true for an ecology. If something happens really, really fast, generally it's going to be damaging to that ecology. It's not going to be able to be quickly intaken and processed by that total ecological body. Whereas evolution arises from a process of gradual self-adjustment. That is to say, the implements of the system come together and they gradually adjust to the stimuli that are taking place. And that is what leads to robust adaptation. And it's important to understand that the geological scales, those are large time scales, right? I don't need to explain to you that those are on the scale of hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And those are the scales at which evolution, this incredible, novel, astonishing process takes place. And now I'm not over here trying to say we should take hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years. I think we can adapt quite a bit more quickly than that, given that we are an adaptive species. But what I'm hoping to point out is that gradual self-adjustment is one of the key features of a complex system, and a system that demonstrates something that is more than the sum of its parts. In fact, numerous sources that I went to when I was researching for that video noted that gradual self-adjustment was one of the most important factors that led to systems that have what we might call emergence or self-organized criticality. And therefore, this desire we have to move fast and to make decisions super fast is not necessarily in and of itself a good thing. That we are desiring things that are not necessarily good for a robust system, for a complex system, for a system that is able to adjust and then act as more than the sum of its parts, which is what we should be aiming for. We should be aiming for this emergent system that can come out of the existing humans as elements organized together into horizontal power structures. And so we need to accept that gradual self-adjustment is part of that system, and that it's not bad to make decisions slowly if those decisions are about something that is complicated. I hope that was insightful for you. Don't click away just yet. I'm going to go through my spiel, yes, but I hope that made sense to you, because I understand it's going to be really hard to overcome the bias that we have as a culture towards making decisions very quickly. But I hope some of that went towards dissolving that bias. Maybe that will inspire you to think more deeply and more slowly about the topic at hand. Think it through. Do the research, the places that I pointed you to. Go read about those. In any occasion, I hope that video was interesting to you. This is one of those times where I actually came up with the topic on the day of. If you liked this video, go click like. if this is like the fifth or sixth time this video, a video on my channel has been produced to you or has been offered to you by the YouTube algorithm, go click subscribe, because, these are the sorts of topics I come back to every single week, and they're political and philosophical and so on. That's the thrust of the channel. And if you're interested in the topics that I'm discussing, I've mentioned A Modern Anarchism numerous times. Go watch A Modern Anarchism, parts 1, 2, and 3. But specifically, if you're interested in the topics I'm discussing here, go watch part 2 of A Modern Anarchism, although you probably want to watch part 1 first. On any occasion, that's most of the spiel, but I also want to include that if you are a big fan of the work that's being done on this channel, if you think that I'm doing valuable work, if you feel like you're being enriched by the work that I'm doing here, then you should go over to my Patreon, which is patreon.com/anarch, which is ANARK, and then go become a patron at any amount you like. Any amount is helpful to me. $2, $5, $7, $10, $20, whatever, whatever you can offer. I need that in order to be able to continue doing this channel. So anyway, I think that's about it. Hopefully the spiel didn't bore you. If you're still here right now, what are you doing? I'm impressed. Good job. I don't know what to say. There's no star here at the end of the tunnel. This is it. Just me kind of weirdly stumbling over my words. That's it. Anyway, I'll see y'all next time.